Thank you so much. Just give a big hand to Bob. He's worked really hard. Thank you. Great. And it's wonderful to see all these bright, shiny, I think mostly vegan faces. I'm really honored to see Phil, Wallen, and Trix. Let's give a big hand to them from all over Australia. I probably shouldn't start doing that because then I want to say Keith McHenry, the founder of Food Not Bombs, and his there's a lot of amazing people out here, and all of you I think really should be applauded. I know for these stories. I'm sure just to get to this conference and to go vegan in our culture is not an easy thing to do. And Paul, gosh, you know, the Food for Life, he just told me they're serving 1 million meals a day in India, vegan meals a day, 1 million a day. Paul. Incredible gathering of people who are, ripples radiate out from our lives into the world. I think that's really the foundation of why we're here for this conference and why we're doing the work that we're doing. So I'd like to just maybe say a few words here at the beginning of the conference. How many of you have read the World Peace Diet? Just so I have a feeling. Quite a few, yeah, great, all right. And we have this other new one, the Circles of Compassion, which is on intersectionality of oppression, which I think in many ways the World Peace Diet is, in a sense, is the foundation of that. And the idea, essentially, I had when I wrote this book, is that, you know, when most of us look at the problems that our culture has, and this is something I think that is just an ongoing sort of effort that we human beings seem to be making. We have this whole long list of dilemmas and problems like war and terrorism and world hunger and disease epidemics and injustice of various kinds, racism, sexism, and so forth, and as well as all the different types of environmental devastation and so forth. So we see all this list of problems that we're generating for the most part ourselves. And then on that list, somewhere, most people would say there is a problem, which is cruelty to animals, right? That's a problem too. And most people would say, yeah, that is a problem, along with these other problems, but that is a problem that's not that important because that's a problem for animals, and you know, they're not important like we human beings are, so that's not that important of a problem. So it's pretty far down on the list of the problems that we have to deal with today. And so when I wrote the World Peace Diet, the number one thing I wanted to do was to just take that mistreatment of animals for food and put it at the very top of the list. That this is the action that is not only the most causing the most suffering actually on this planet, because we're killing, just in the United States, for example, 75 million animals every day who are all horribly mutilated and abused. So just the amount of suffering. But on top of that, I think in many ways it is the spinning fury, the core of all of our culture's dilemmas. Because what animal agriculture does and what the mentality of violence towards animal does is really two things. One, in the outer world, it's the most devastating thing we're doing to our environment, to our society, the cultural health, and to our physical health. But even more importantly, I think, it's something that I think really it's important for our movement to bring this forward more, is that it's also devastating the inner landscape of our consciousness. It shuts down in many ways our natural wisdom and intelligence and the capacities that we would have to solve the problems that we're creating. So Madeline and I, my wife, have been traveling now. We just day before yesterday, Wednesday night, we finished up the last lecture of a 3-month tour. It was in 81 days. We did 90 events in 81 days, all over southern United States, going all the way to Key West and back to California. And basically spreading the message of veganism, because I think this is it. There's no more important message we can possibly talk about and encourage others to think about than the message of the routine mistreatment of animals for food and other products. This is it. If we human beings do not make a serious effort to not only understand this, but to bring our lives into alignment with our understanding, we are, it's very problematic whether we'll even be able to stay on this planet much longer. And I would say, in many ways, it's maybe harsh to say it, but I think it's true in the sense that we're not worthy, actually. We're proving that we're not worthy to live on such a beautiful and abundant planet because we're just destroying it. And we're causing so much suffering. So what veganism is essentially is a radical, inclusive mentality. It's saying I'm going to include all living beings within the sphere of my kindness and concern. And it's, I think, essentially also important to see it as healing from the fundamental wounds that our culture inflicts on all of us being raised here. So this is how I see it essentially. And briefly, what I'd like to do in the very kind of short time I have here is just briefly go over a little bit the economic and cultural devastation caused by animal agriculture, maybe very briefly the physical, and then get into a little bit more the inner psychological and spiritual dimension, which I think is also important to understand, and how we can transform our society, maybe some of the most important aspects, at least in my point of view, of being an effective vegan advocate. But I think the most important thing really is to make an effort to really understand the big picture of our culture's food choices. Environmentally, just briefly, the thing about animal agriculture, as I think you're probably all aware, is it's just ridiculously inefficient and wasteful, and so we lived in an RV for 17 years, traveling around North America, and basically the entire North America has been reduced to huge fields of genetically engineered corn and soy and alfalfa and other grains. And this is a war against nature, against plants as well as animals, against ecosystems. Really, it's a terrible war, and it's because we have to grow huge amounts of grain and feed these to these poor animals who you don't typically see. They're stuck away in these stinking sheds where they never see the light of day by the thousands and by the tens of thousands. But the effects of this are devastating to aquifers, the huge amount of water that's wasted. As Bob Linden never tires pointing out, it's 32 to 1, according to the United Nations study. 32 vegans use as much water for food as one person eating a standard Western diet. So we can really solve so many of the problems that we have environmentally. This is very good news, really, that we're so wasteful. I mean, it's terrible news on one level, but it's good news in the sense that if we stop the way we're living and we stop actually taking out our wallets and voting for meat, dairy products, and eggs, then we will begin to create an enormous healing of our earth. And so this basic understanding of the environmental devastation, causing huge dead zones in the oceans, overfishing of the oceans, the cutting down of rainforests right now, we should really need to be aware of these things. About an acre per second right now. The driving force behind that is growing soybeans to feed to factory farm pigs, cows, chickens, and fishes. This is driving the largest mass extinction of species in 65 million years, again, driven by one thing, people taking out their wallets and paying for meat, dairy products, and eggs. And so this massive devastation of genetic diversity, essentially, this is something that you really can't undo. When we're causing, biologists aren't sure, but the estimates are somewhere between 100 and 300 species every single day are going extinct because we want to eat meat, dairy products, and eggs, and we're destroying rainforests, which is prime habitat. We're destroying the lungs of the earth, as well as oceans are being completely devastated. 2/3 of the fish we're eating nowadays are factory farmed in the United States because the fish in the oceans are gone, essentially. So again, to understand these things, to see that factory farming of fish is enormously environmentally devastating as well, and that the demand for fish is huge, almost incalculable, because we're not only feeding fish to people. Scientists discovered a long time ago that if you enrich the feed of these poor animals who are stuck in these stinking sheds and in feedlots with cholesterol, essentially with animal protein and saturated fat cholesterol, that it's profitable. They'll give more milk and they'll fatten up faster. So cows, for example, don't just eat grass, they eat grain, but they don't stop there. They feed them fish meal. They don't stop there. They feed them, everything else, dogs and cats and slaughterhouse waste and so forth. So this is devastating to the health of these animals. And it's also devastating to our health. It's devastating to ecosystems. And these animals are concentrating toxins in their bodies all the way along the way, which causes terrible suffering for them. And of course, then we're eating this stuff and feeding it to our children. And so we have to understand that environmentally, there's no greater gift we can do than to help spread the vegan message. I mean, there's no greater gift we can give to future generations, the ecosystems, to wildlife. And I just have to mention this briefly, that the U.S. Department of Wildlife Services, basically all it does is kill animals. They're under contracts, or anytime a rancher or farmer has coyotes or bobcats or prairie dogs or skunks, any animal that they think is bothering them, then our government, our taxpayer dollars goes out and kills millions of these animals. And since this new move for happy meat and free range and so forth, we have more animals that are sort of in electrified fences, and so the killing done by wildlife services has really escalated since this move in the last few years. So it's important to really also educate people that moving toward free range and grass-fed is definitely a step in the wrong direction. It causes more killing. It's devastating on every level. The animals suffer terribly, and of course they're killed. So that's the environmental part. The cultural part, to just be aware again, when we go vegan, we're doing the greatest thing we can possibly do, really, I think, to live in a healthy society, because our violence towards animals also creates violence within our society. And the research I did on the World Peace Diet really, I think, underlies this. And I learned so much doing the research for this book. Not only historically, the fact, for example, that we know now, more or less, basically, that people first started herding animals 8 to 10 million years ago, 8 to 10,000 years ago in what is today Iraq. And when they did that, it changed the entire culture. That essentially, gradually, a new culture emerged where human beings, instead of respecting animals as they did for thousands and thousands of years as mysterious and powerful cohabitants of the earth with us, began to see them as mere property. It was wild sheep, and then wild goats, and then later wild cows. And so this whole mentality of seeing these beings as mere things to be used created a society that had maybe 4 or 5 things that I think we can still see are in our society today, because we still live in a herding society. This is an important point to understand, that we still live today in a society that's fundamentally organized around owning and eating animals. That's the foundation of our culture. We don't think of it that way. It's not quite so obvious as it was maybe 8 or 10,000 years ago when we first started doing this to sheep, and then goats, and then cows, and then other animals. But that's, the animals are, like I say, they're stuck out of sight. But you can go to any building, you'll see them in the refrigerators, and people are eating them. And the primary way that we relate to each other is through meals. So it's very powerful social programming that goes on around seeing animals as mere things. So essentially, what happened was we had the rising of a wealthy elite. When this happened, this took thousands of years. It was very gradual. As we started owning animals as property, a wealthy elite emerged. They were the first capitalists, in the sense that capita means Latin. The ancient word for head is a head of sheep and goats. And these proto-capitalists were wealthy because they owned the most head of sheep and goats and other livestock. And they invented 2 institutions. They saw somebody else over there, another king or another rich herder who had a lot of livestock, and they started for the very first time, the very first word for war, actually, the ancient Sanskrit word gavya literally means the desire for more cows. So they would go and try to take their cows. Of course, they wouldn't give up without a fight. So they had the first large-scale war on this planet. Was because of animal agriculture, and then whoever lost the war, we introduced slavery, because not only did the animals become the property, but the human beings also became the property of the victors. And this is one of the things I also learned in the research into the World Peace Diet, that whatever we have done to animals, sooner or later we have done to other people. There's never been an exception. Always we end up doing, we own them, we enslave them, now we're microchipping them, so we ought to be careful what we're doing to these animals. So, but anyway, so the thing to understand here is that a new mentality was injected, a new way of thinking, a new way of acting. Enslaving women began to be also reduced to be seen as mere breeders, the way men learned to see female animals as mere breeders. And the role model for boys, again, began to be the role model of the tough, hard, disconnected herder who was capable of violence against animals and capable of violence against other rival herders. And so a very patriarchal, violent, warlike culture emerged out of the Eastern Mediterranean and spread basically throughout the Northern Mediterranean, Central Asia, into Europe, and of course came to the Americas. And it's basically still spreading through the large-scale corporations and financial institutions, ConAgra and Cargill and Monsanto, Burger King, Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, the World Bank, the IMF, the large corporation and governmental agencies and so forth. I refer to this whole thing as the military, industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical, media complex. This vast complex. And essentially, this is what we're born into. So it's important to understand that all of us are born into this. And we're born into being forced from the time we're little infants to essentially not just witness adults, our parents and teachers and relatives and so forth, eating the flesh and secretions of tortured and really terribly treated animals, but they make us eat it also, right? So we get this program injected into us very powerfully from the time we're little kids. We have to understand that. So I think, in a sense, when we really understand the power of programming and how meals, anthropologists understand that in any society, meals are the most powerful way that any culture transmits its values from generation to generation, that across all species, offspring do not question the parents' food. So I think, anyone who goes vegan is almost a miracle. So congratulations to all you guys who are vegan, because it takes a lot of character, I think, to do that. Yeah, it takes a lot to really go against the grain and flow. There's a great saying by Krishnamurti. He said, basically, it's not a good idea to be well-adjusted to a profoundly sick society, right? So that's what we're talking about, Instead of being well-adjusted to a society that's devastating ecosystems and just in chronic war with itself and dominating animals and creating enormous amounts of disease, to question that, and then, of course, that creates the tension, which is, well, we want to be liked by other people, so how does this all play out? And when we leave here, we go out into the world, it's important to remember that there's only, when we see people eating meat and dairy and so forth, going to McDonald's or going into a steakhouse or going into Safeway or wherever and buying these products, there's only one reason anyone does it. The reason they do it is that they're following orders. They're just doing what they've been told to do from the time they're little kids. And to somehow be effective in helping people to question that indoctrination. And I think the best way is by living it ourselves and understanding these ideas as deeply as we can. So the cultural violence in animal agriculture is really spread throughout our entire culture. The thing to understand is that, we live just in the United States, for example. I know there's people from other countries here, but just in the United States, we're killing 75 million animals every day for food. So this is a vast industrialized killing machine of massive proportions that reaches its tentacles everywhere, into every ocean, rainforest, into every cultural institution, most people right into their bodies. And everything it touches, it's harmful. It's devastating. And to understand what it does to the poor slaughterhouse workers, as Madeline and I traveled around North America in our RV, we saw and visited stockyards and slaughterhouses and factory farms and things. And we saw very clearly that not only are these places horribly, just terrible places for the animals, for the people that have to do the work also. And for people, very often they're undocumented people who just can't really get any other work. And they're stabbing animals all day. These people have the highest rates of suicide and drug addiction. They have the highest rates of work-related injuries, of spousal abuse and child abuse. Basically, they're forced to do work that brings out the worst in them. And psychologists refer to the mental illness that they get, essentially, as perpetrator-induced traumatic stress disorder. And so we have to, again, understand that if we want to eat meat, dairy products, and eggs, we're paying people to do hideous violence, and we're spreading webs of trauma that radiate out into the web of relations in our entire culture. The people who are traumatized also traumatize other people who traumatize other people. So what veganism is, essentially, is understanding what Martin Luther King said, I think so clearly. He said, violence anywhere hurts everyone everywhere because we're all interconnected, this basic truth. And when veganism is saying the same thing, except it's saying it like this: kindness and compassion and mercy and justice anywhere, bless everyone everywhere because we're all interconnected, and living our lives as if we mean it. And realizing that, every year, this is another thing that's important to understand, we're growing enough food to feed 12 to 15 billion people. We only have 5 billion, we only have 7.2 billion people in a sense compared to how many we're feeding. And yet we have roughly 1 or 2 billion people starving every year. 30, 40, 50,000 every single day are dying of starvation. And again, it's because we're feeding most of the food we're growing to animals while people starve. So this is really a driving force behind war. You can never have peace without justice, and this is an extremely unjust situation. And the irony, of course, involved is that people in the industrialized nations of the world, it's not difficult for us with our relatively high-powered economies to drive up the price of grain on the world market and feed that grain to our cows and pigs and chickens and imprisoned fishes and so forth. But at the same time, though, we're driving up the price of grain on the world market too high for people who live in less industrialized nations, and they're just not able to afford it, and they're being forced off the land by the World Bank and IMF and other policies. So they see their babies dying of starvation in their arms, while over here, not far away, are people living so high off the hog, eating meat, dairy products, and eggs, which represent huge amounts of petroleum and grain and land and water and pollution, and causing enormous suffering to these other people. So the thing to understand here, I guess, underlying everything is the ironies involved as well, is where everyone is suffering from this, in the sense that the hungry people are suffering from diseases of malnutrition, and those who are living in the industrialized nations, we have these epidemics of the diseases that come, as you all know, from eating huge amounts of grain that's been converted into 4 things: saturated fat, cholesterol, acidifying animal protein, and huge amounts of sewage and nitrous oxide and methane, which are driving global climate change as well. And so we have the epidemics of diseases that we all hear about, like heart disease and strokes and hypertension and liver disease and kidney disease and breast and prostate and colon cancer and arthritis and diabetes and obesity and dementia and Parkinson's. And there's a whole range of problems that we find afflicting people who live in eating these kinds of foods, and they've been well connected, it's been well established. So the good news is that we can enormously bless our own physical health and the health of our society and the health of our environment when we understand these ideas that animal agriculture is actually the most devastating physical behavior that we engage in as a species to the outer world in the sense of the environment and culture and our physical health. But what I want to talk about here a little bit in the time that I have is that it also affects us emotionally and psychologically and spiritually, and that really to move to a plant-based diet, to go vegan, is the most healing thing we can do psychologically, and to help our society actually begin to wake up out of this trance that we've all been, in a sense, forced into. So from the point of view of our physical health, the basic idea is, I'll just kind of sum up, I have actually a chapter in the World Peace Diet called The Intelligence of Human Physiology, which kind of goes into all this. And summing it all up, just looking at our physiology, basically the bottom line is that all of us have been given the gift of a physical body that doesn't require any animals to suffer the nutrients we need to be healthy, but all of us have been born into a society where we've been forced from the time we're little infants to take that gift we've been given by the benevolent creator and just throw it right back into her face or his face and say, you know what, we're going to stab animals anyway and kill them and eat them. And when we do that, we sow seeds of enormous violence and suffering for these animals who are defenseless in our hands. And we also sow enormous suffering for ourselves. And so this is the key thing that I refer to it, maybe in honor of our Australian friends, the boomerang effect. Whatever we sow, we will reap. Whatever we put out will come back. And to really to see that all the world religions and all the wise people of our history have emphasized the fundamental spiritual teaching or ethical teaching that whatever we most want for ourselves, to give that to others. If we want to be loved, then to be loving. If we want to be free ourselves and to free others. This basic teaching, another way of saying it is whatever we do to others, it'll happen to us. And what we are doing to animals, it is coming back. And even though the animals cannot retaliate themselves, they don't retaliate themselves, but our violence towards them always retaliates in a variety of ways. And the diseases we inflict on them, we find ourselves. And the psychological trauma we inflict on them, we find ourselves. And we find the pharmaceutical industry getting very rich on drugs for animals, and drugs for physical ailments, and drugs for psychological sickness of human beings. These are all interconnected. We have to understand this, that this system does work very well to concentrate wealth in the hands of a few, but in terms of life on this planet and us, it's time for us to question this, refuse to exploit other living beings, because if we don't, we are being exploited ourselves. And so the inner landscape that I want to mention here just briefly is that in order to be eating animal foods, all of us have to be injected with a certain mentality. And that mentality is not in our best interest. It's a mentality of exclusivism. We learn early on through sitting at tables and just eating dairy and eggs and meat we don't talk about it, but this is a teaching that goes in very deep at the paradigmatic level, at the pre-conscious level, to exclude others from the sphere of our kindness and compassion. We develop a mentality of exclusivism. And so, what veganism is, it's radical inclusivism. It's saying I'm going to include all beings within the sphere of my kindness and concern. It's also a mentality of disconnectedness, because the subtext of every meal is basically don't make the connection between what what's on your plate and what it took to get it on your plate. Just stay shallow, don't look deeply, don't feel deeply, don't question deeply, don't listen deeply, just stay shallow. What veganism is essentially more than anything is the willingness and the yearning, I would say the yearning to understand, to question deeply, to look deeply, to feel deeply, to try to live authentically, to live my life the short time we have on this planet, to live it with, to fulfill a meaning outside of the realm of my own self-interest, to live a life to bless others. And in order to do that, we have to question the official stories of our society. We have to question the protein story, the calcium story, the human superiority story, all these stories that are just injected into us through the mealtime rituals that are not only devastating animals, but also devastating our capacity for the intelligence and wisdom that would allow us to live the way we're supposed to on this beautiful and abundant planet. Have you noticed how beautiful and abundant the earth is? And we're growing enough food to feed everybody, and we could grow so much more. Veganic farming is now being understood. I just read the other day, some guy in LA is growing over $100,000 worth of crops on just 1 acre of land. We're learning how you can, and we can do these things veganic. We can grow huge amounts of food in small areas. So the thing to realize is the basic good news in all of this is that as we move toward a plant-based vegan consciousness and way of living, we can allow the oceans to come back and the rivers to come back and the wildlife and animals to celebrate their lives in nature, and we can find our way of being on this planet. We're lost right now. I mean, we're lost in confusion and in denial and in this disconnectedness, this mentality of disconnectedness, which serves very well the wealthy elite. It basically thrives on people who will be willing consumers of products and willing consumers of TV news that is just basically a bunch of lies. So it's important for us to understand that underlying everything is learning to develop our intuition, our inner wisdom, learning to connect with our own inner wisdom and trusting that, and feeling our solidarity with all living beings, to realize that we're all expressions of one life, that essentially all living beings are interconnected and our welfare is interconnected. So these are some of the ideas. Another basic thing, I'll maybe mention two more. One is eating animal foods essentially forces us to adopt a mentality of reductionism, where we learn to look with eyes that when we see a being, we only see a thing. Right? And what veganism is again, it's learning to see a being when we see a being. So in a sense, we're not any better than anybody else. We're just simply coming home to our true nature and looking with our true natural human eyes and seeing cows when we see cows, not just seeing steak when we see cows, seeing a thing, reducing a being to a thing. When we reduce a being to a thing, we not only are capable of enormous violence against them, but we essentially reduce ourselves, and we create an economic system which we can see, where we reduce each other to things. We reduce ecosystems to mere board feet of lumber, right? When we turn other people into instruments to be used, we end up ourselves becoming a commodity that we have to sell on the market. We make a good resume and try to sell ourselves, and we become a slave in a system because we enslave animals. If we want to be free, we have to really understand this at a deep level. We must practice freeing those who we hold in our hands and who we are not freeing, who we are showing no mercy to. It's just what the great teacher, what Jesus said. He's right, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. These animals are in our hands. So when we forget this, when we essentially have this drummed out of us by being forced to participate in mealtime rituals of violence and of disconnectedness and of reductionism and of commodification of life and of exclusivism and also of privilege and elitism, because the subtext of every meal is that certain beings are inherently superior and other beings are inherently inferior, and it's totally fine for the superior beings to dominate and exploit and abuse however they want the inferior being. So how can we create a society of equality or justice when every meal essentially is injecting the entire population with a mentality of injustice and might makes right and entitlement? That's what we have to understand. So going vegan is the absolute most beneficial thing anyone can do in terms of, it's not just a theoretical thing. You can't be a vegan in theory, right? It's actually a practice. It's a practice that we live, but in order to do the practice properly, I think we have to understand the deeper issues involved. The other thing is that animal agriculture from the very beginning has been essentially not merely about human beings dominating and exploiting animals. It has been more specifically and more accurately, really, been about men dominating female animals. It's about men dominating and exploiting the uteruses and mammary glands of animals, impregnating them against their will, stealing their babies, this massive sexual violence, which when you think about it, this is something that we're not only harming these poor mothers, cows and pigs and sheep and goats and fishes, all these animals are impregnated against their will, and then their babies are stolen. This is what we do in animal agriculture. But these animals don't just suffer. We suffer a lot when we do this. We get hard and we repress what I refer to in the World Peace Diet as Sophia, the sacred feminine. Sophia was the ancient Greek goddess of wisdom, and this is our inherent wisdom as human beings. We know better than to be doing what we're doing. We know it's wrong. That's why when we go out and we start talking about these things, these ideas to people, they would rather not talk about it because we're ashamed, you know, rightfully so, for what we're doing. And yet it's been a program injected into us against our will to repress Sophia, the sacred feminine, which is the inner wisdom within all of us, whether we are men or women, that yearns to protect and love and nurture life and to create neighborhoods and communities and societies based on healthy relationships. But animal agriculture is such a violent, unhealthy relationship, and we're eating it and feeding it to our children and practicing it on a massive scale that it pollutes all of our relationships, and we lose our own self-respect and self-esteem because we don't respect animals. And so going vegan is essentially healing these wounds. That's why it's so powerful. But we have to understand what it is, I think, on a deeper level, the bigger picture of our culture's story, and see that a vegan revolution or a vegan evolution is maybe even a better word, is the foundation, the only foundation for a future that will be possible for us as human beings. That this is really the way forward. And that when we understand that, I think we begin to realize how important it is for us to not only make an effort in the outer world to bring this message to others, but also to live this, to live what this teaching is, because it really does require us to transform ourselves. You know, Gandhi, I think, was right when he said there can be no positive social change without positive personal change. That we need to, I think we're called to make an effort to bring our lives into alignment, not just on the outer level of acting with kindness towards animals, but remember that, you know, Donald Watson, when he coined the word vegan, he said, in 1944, he said, "Veganism is a philosophy and way of life which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practical, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose." So the motivation at the core of veganism is compassion, or kindness, or love, or mercy, or tenderness. It's to resist the cultural program of harming and abusing animals, and to minimize that. And animals means, we're also mammals, right? So that means human beings too. So it's important, I think, for us as human beings in our society, as vegans, to make an effort to treat all living beings with kindness and compassion and caring, and realize that we go through probably stages in the vegan journey. It's not something that we just, like, you go vegan and that's it, you're done, you don't have to do anything more. I'm vegan, leave me alone, I'm vegan. That actually we go vegan, and then there are stages in this journey, and I talk about this a little bit, like, for example, when we first go vegan, we're in the beginning vegan stage, which is a hard place to be in our society. People are making fun of us, maybe. Our doctor's telling you, oh, you're going to die of a B12 deficiency probably, or where are you getting your protein anyway? I learned in medical school you need to eat animals to get healthy, or you know, we're getting bombarded, and then people have questions. They'll say, well, you know, I don't know, but you vegans are wrong because, you know, your carrots you're eating, they're screaming too, you just don't hear it, you know, so we all got to think of that. Now what do I do? You know, so as vegans, we've got to make an effort to get beyond the beginning stage, where and a lot of people in the beginning don't know how to eat food that's really healthy, and people don't get enough calories. They think they can't eat any starch or something. So it's important to eat enough calories so that we're thriving. I mean, I've been a vegan since 1980, 35 years now. I haven't been to a doctor in 40 years. I mean, it's the greatest thing for your health, I can guarantee it. I can't say enough about it. I was in China just about a year ago in Taiwan. I remember years ago I took a class with this woman I was learning Chinese, and she said, when you go to China, you have to know that they will not even listen to anyone unless they're 60 years old, because if you're not 60, you're still young, you're still wet behind the ears. You have to be at least 60 years old before you are, they'll take you seriously, you know. And so it was so neat, because I went to Taiwan, and the World Peace Diet actually was a bestseller there in the months before I got there. So I gave a lecture on the World Peace Diet in Taipei, and 2,000 people showed up, you know, to hear, which I thought was really great. You know, to hear. Not many people usually show up to hear a vegan lecture. But anyway, it was really interesting because I could stand up there in front of them and say, listen, everybody, you've got to listen to me now because I'm 60 years old. And they said, well, you don't look like you're 60. And I said, well, I'm a vegan, but nevertheless, I'm 60 years old. So, the benefits to our health are enormous, but the idea that I want to make here about in the beginning stage, very often we don't really understand these bigger ideas, and maybe we don't know how to eat in a way that's really healthy. So unfortunately, for myself, traveling around and talking to people, I have seen people who, a few years later, they were vegan, but then a few years later, they're not vegan. So people can sometimes go back, which is a shame. So it's important for us, I think, to really build communities to support people, and for people to make an effort to get beyond the beginning vegan stage, at least to stage 2. Stage 2 is also kind of a difficult stage to be in. Stage 2 is the stage of the angry vegan. Right now, I've gone vegan. I know how to, and I know the answers to all these questions. I know what to say to the doctor when he says I'm going to have a B12 deficiency, and I know how to eat healthy vegan food. But I'm angry all the time, right? Because people don't listen to me, and I'm trying to tell them, I'm trying to change them. I got to make them go vegan. Gosh, I'm going to make you go vegan. And so, so we have the angry vegan stage. Some people kind of bypass that one, and they go to what I refer to as the closet vegan stage. So you're a vegan? No, not really. Just leave me alone. I don't talk about something else. And so neither one of these stages are very effective and are very harmonious. So I think it's important for us to get beyond them to what I refer to as deep veganism, where we are beginning to embody what veganism is as a deeper understanding of the nature of our relationship with each other and with the animals, and live these principles as loving kindness and compassion and caring and mercy for all living beings, and realize we're just here for a few years on this beautiful planet to do the best we can while we're here to create a field of consciousness of caring and kindness. That this is to reject the injustice and violence of our society, and to build a new world, basically a new consciousness, a new society based on another way of living, and to support vegan businesses, and to support and have people that can help coach and help other people move along here. Because essentially the idea is if I'm trying to change something, I'm going to try to just change you. People are going to resist that. So the more we can embody this, and as Walt Whitman, I think he said in one of his poems, I think it was Song of Myself, he said, I and mine, we do not convince by arguments, we convince by our presence. This basic idea that we can learn to embody veganism in a way that when we talk to people, our words will have weight with them. They'll feel the resonance of that, and we'll engage in behaviors and create a movement that I think will be absolutely unstoppable. The future is vegan. There's no question about it. And the way we get there is by living it. The ends and the means are the same. So this, I think, is really the foundation for the world that we are here to create together, to co-create together, to plant the seeds. And even though I may not be able to change another person, but what I can do is I can plant seeds. And I think the more we live what veganism is, the more effectively we'll be able to plant those seeds. So I just want to say, I know all of you, if you found your way here to this conference, I just send you my deepest love and appreciation, because I know that you're concerned and really on the path of embodying these ideas more and more fully, and I think bringing this message in effective ways like Bob does through advocacy, through the radio, and so many of you there's so many ways we can do it. So I think the most important thing is to find out what unique gift or ability I have, and how I can bring that to bringing this message to the world. What kind of a way can I live my life to help bring this message to people in a way that is effective, and in a way that is resonant through my deepest yearning and desires, through art, through music, through videos, through teaching, through cooking, through sharing food with hungry people, through helping to support organizations. So many of you are doing so many things in these areas. And so I'll just close by saying, I was also a Zen monk in Korea back in the 80s, and going there, it was interesting. I'd gone vegetarian, living in communities. Community is really important. I think community is the most important thing. Community is the reason we eat meat and dairy. I think community is really the reason we're able to somehow stop that. So for me, I lived at the farm in Tennessee in 1975, which was the largest hippie commune in the world. And there was about 1,000 people in that community, and they were basically all hippies from California. And I was just there for a couple of weeks, but I saw these people, and they were eating a totally plant-based diet. So I never ate meat again in my life since that day in 1975 when I was with these people there. And then I guess it was about 9 years later, I shaved my head and became a monk in Korea, and I found myself in a Zen monastery. in South Korea, and we were meditating every day from 3 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night in silence for 90 days. And it was just about freeing consciousness from the indoctrination, from cultural indoctrination, to connect with the true nature of mind, the true nature of our being, and to just connect. And I realized my mind had been completely just filled with all these ideas, this self-image, these concepts, and just hijacked, basically, by my cultural upbringing. So I think if we can get a glimpse of that, of our true nature, and that our true nature is love and kindness and joy and freedom and caring. And I found myself really in this community in Southeast Asia, in South Korea, that had been living what we would call veganism for 650 years, since the 1200s in that community. No meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wool, no silk, no leather. Even mosquitoes you wouldn't kill, you would just kind of let them go. This is the foundation of sanity. This is the foundation of personal and cultural sanity and joy and harmony and freedom and abundance. And this is, so to do what we can to create communities like this. I would love to see more communities, physical, actually people living in communities that are vegan. And I'd like to see more communities where people get together, like in meetups and more conferences and more online communities. But the more we can do to help bring and create vegan community through restaurants, there's so many great things happening. I think that's the foundation. And so that was the reason, really, why I felt like I had to write the World Peace Diet. And it was really great to hear, actually, when the World Peace Diet came out. It's actually been 10 years in 2005. And Donald Watson, who coined the word vegan, was actually still alive at that point. And I had a friend who was a journalist, and he went over to England. He was doing like a 3-part interview of Donald Watson, and he went over twice. He was writing about how Donald Watson was walking around in the hills of England. He was very healthy and so forth at the age of 95. And then he went over a 3rd time, and he called me on the phone. He said, well, I just want you to know I'm over here in England, and I'm with Donald Watson. And, you know, he's not walking around in the hills anymore. He's 90, he was almost 96 at that point. And anyway, he said what he does every day is he just sits in his bed in the afternoon. He's telling the people that it's around him, and he feels it's his time to go now. He's had a great life. But I wanted to let you know that what he does every afternoon is he sits in his bed and he has his son-in-law read him the World Peace Diet. And that he's saying this is the book that gives his vision of what veganism is, and something like that. So I felt, the book had just come out at that point, and he was able to just read it before he left the planet and say, oh, wow. And so that was a feeling I had, when I was writing this book. It was really like it wasn't my book. It's a book that's just someone had to volunteer, and I really didn't want to. I said, no, I don't want to write it, I don't want to write it. But finally, my wife said, look, Will, if you want to read that book that you say you want to read, I wanted to read a book that went into the big picture of our culture's mistreatment of animals. You'll have to write it yourself, probably. But it's really been great to see. It's now translated into over 15 languages. It's become really a worldwide movement of looking deeply and feeling deeply into our culture's mistreatment of animals for food, and from a deep sense of kindness and connection with all beings, to transform our lives and to make our lives actually the living expression of the world that we would like to have. And I think that's very important to move in that direction. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you. Silverstein, some of you may know this poem, but I just really like it. Shel Silverstein was a terrific poet. He wrote a poem called Point of View. It goes like this: Thanksgiving dinners, sad and thankless, Christmas dinners, dark and blue, when you stop and try to see it from a turkey's point of view. Sunday dinner isn't sunny, Easter feasts are just bad luck, when you stop and try to see it as a chicken or a duck. Oh, how I once loved tuna salad, steak and lobster, lamb chops too, till I stopped and looked at dinner from the dinner's point of view. I think that sums up a lot of this. It's just stopping and deepening our connection and moving into another direction. So I want you just to all go forth and multiply, make this thing multiply. And, I'm only going to be here for a couple of hours. I actually have to fly overnight to Cincinnati, where I'm going to be conducting a vegan wedding tomorrow. Some teaching there in Cincinnati. But we have a table right here, Bob's table at the corner. I have some copies of the World Peace Diet I had shipped to you. I don't want to bring any of them on the plane, so please come by. I'm happy to sign them. You get a free CD. They print out 100% post-consumer recycled paper. We have both ones here. So I'm happy to talk to you afterwards, answer any questions you may have. And thank you very much. Much love to you.